Welcome to Life and Liberty Radio with David Householder. I'm Josh Jose, and together, you and I are taking another step toward freedom, both spiritual and political. So get comfortable, breathe in, and ignite your imagination. Envision a society that is spiritually deep and truly free. It's easy if you try.
This is my analysis of the State of the Union Address 2014 by President Barack Obama. Now, I want to start by saying that I am not an Obama basher. I'm not a birther. I don't think he wakes up in the morning rubbing his hands, wondering how he's going to sink the country. I believe he means the best for America. I believe that he, in his own way, is a patriot. But I believe that the patterns of thinking, the way he's wired up, limits his understanding of what's going on. Now, that's true for me and for you, the listener, too. We're limited by the way we think, and we often don't give a whole lot of credence to opposite views. But it's a lot more dangerous when you're the President of the United States. And I think we have an ideologically rigid president. But I think he's learning, and there's evidence that he is growing in his understanding of the free market, of how war works, of how we operate in different countries, things like drones and nukes and everything else. I think he's kind of improving the way he thinks by broadening it, but he's only got a couple years left, so it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate that it's taken this long, and I doubt that it's going to go far enough to make a difference. And you and I are not in positions of power where we can do nearly as much damage as the president can. And so I'm just going to take piece by piece some of the things he said, the good and the bad. I mentioned the drones. And he's starting to realize that, hey, incoming drones, that's not good for morale, and it's not good for America's standing in the world. That makes some sense. And I really liked it when he called employers to raise wages. I think that's great. You can do that. Voluntarily invite people to do that. Let companies do that. Don't mandate it. There's a big difference there. And being up there inspiring us, I think that's good. But telling us we have to, then we're no longer a free country. I think being a free country is really, really important. And I think it's really easy for us to lose sight of that. The problem is that most Americans, when I talk to them, if you say that you're not for welfare or you're not for Social Security, they believe that what that means is you don't care about poor people, you don't want to feed the hungry. And as a Christian, I want to feed all the hungry, and I don't want anyone to live in poverty in this country, but I want the charity to be voluntary, not to be coerced. I would like to give out of my pocket, out of my time to help the poor. I don't want it taken out of my pocket and given to the poor. There's a big difference between the two. One is a free society and one is not. Well, here's some other things he said. He said that more oil is produced than ever before, and we all know that the United States is becoming, if not the number one, very soon to be the number one oil producer in the United States, but that's basically in spite of President Obama. He's done everything he can to stop that from happening by over-regulation and by keeping the drilling from happening on public land. Now, first of all, I don't think there should be public land. That's a whole another debate, because people take better care of private land than they do of public land. Look at private forests, which look beautiful over Georgia, compared to the public forests, Pacific Northwest, the national forest, where there's clear cutting everywhere. It's called the tragedy of the commons. If you don't own something, you don't take care of it. And public property, public schools, public concrete in cities tends to be graffitied and falling apart and not taken care of. So really, this whole oil-produced thing is kind of taking credit for something he probably wanted to stop in the first place. Talks about deficits being cut by half. Now, deficits and debt are two different things, but most Americans don't know that. The deficit is the amount we are spending every day compared to the amount that we're taking in every day. It has nothing to do with the mountain of debt that is piling up. In fact, during this 65-minute speech, which I think was pretty well delivered, our public debt went up by $120 million. That's almost $2 million a minute, and it continues to do so. The only reason the deficit is cut in half is we're no longer doing trillion-dollar stimulus packages like we were a few years ago. We are still spending way more than we take in, and he is not reducing America's indebtedness. We are not less in debt than we were when he took office. We're not less in debt than we were a month ago or a year ago or 2 years ago. Our debt is piling up at $2 million a minute. That adds up to pretty real money after a while. And we're still spending about 25% more than we take in. Now, what business could continue to operate at that level? So he is not decreasing spending. We're not financially healthier as a government than we were before. Talks about inequality having deepened, and I think we should do something about that. But I don't think it should be coerced. The only way to fix that in a coercive society is to take from people who have more and give it to people who have less, which creates a total state, really, because they have to know everything everybody makes and know where everybody stands to the dollar economically and make sure that they kind of pass that around. And that just is not a free society. A free society is a society where people are encouraged to benefit the poor. My wife and I were just in Leiden in Holland a month ago, and we were looking over this beautiful, from the 1600s, beautiful orphanage, which was put up by one of the fathers of the town. And the wealthy citizens of Holland in every city competed to be the most charitable. And Holland in the 1600s had virtually no government. They kicked out the Spaniards and replaced it with stadthouders, people holding the place for other people. And these people really didn't govern, and they rotated authority. And there was an almost entirely free society. This little country of a few million people was the superpower of the world for almost a century. It was a beehive of total employment and prosperity everywhere. So I think we should do something about inequality, but I don't want it to be coerced. Talks about our job as reducing these trends, reverse them. Sure, I get that. But it's not his job. It's not the government's job. It's our job as a country. Building ladders of opportunity. Great phrase. We need to build ladders of opportunity. Who's we? Well, he means the federal government. And he says, hey, if you guys don't legislate this, I'm going to take steps anyways to build ladders of opportunity. Well, if the government got out of the economy altogether, there would be all kinds of ladders of opportunity. People aren't hiring right now because of all the health care laws and all the difficulties to hire people. I know I'm self-employed, and almost everybody I know who is self-employed, and I run in those circles, would love to hire more people. But they can't do that because of all the regulations involved and all the red tape involved in hiring people. We'd have total employment in a week if we got the government out of the economy. And it's kind of scary when he says, I'll do it with or without legislation. I'll take steps if you guys don't keep up with me. Well, emperors say that, but not in a democracy, not in a republic. Do we take steps like that? Does one person just decide, I'm going to be in charge of that? Talks about Michelle Obama bringing down obesity, and she's done so by inspiring people, and there really has been some progress in that area, and I think that's great. But you see, that's the way we should do things, by education, by teaching, by helping people understand, not by limiting their caloric intake, or like the mayor of New York a while back saying we don't want any big sodas anymore, we're going to make them illegal. That's not the way you do things in a free society. And I continue to say this, but a free society is a precious thing. It's a precious thing. And that doesn't mean a non-caring society. I think we need to raise the caring level in our society. And I would love to have the opportunity freely to give what I give in taxes to the poor, and do so relationally, and be able to do it with accountability, and to invest in those charities that help the most. I would love to do that. And a lot of Americans would love to do that. We could compete for helping the most. And I'm just absolutely sure that these organizations could do a better job than the government would do. And so all of these topics, we need access to a good job, he says. Well, okay, we would have full employment if we didn't have the government getting in the way of business. There's no question in my mind that everybody would be working. The biggest scarcity we would have in this country would be labor. We wouldn't have enough people to do all the things. And when there's a scarcity of labor with the laws of supply and demand, what happens? The price of labor goes up, wages go up. This would happen almost instantly in this country. Talked about the tax code having incentives for people sending jobs abroad. Well, the reason people send jobs abroad is because our corporate taxes are the highest in the world. If you're a corporation and you want to start a business and your taxes are the highest here of anywhere, which they are, 25% is sort of the going rate in Europe. It's 40% here in the United States, which is just obscene and absurd. Why would anybody want to start something here? The best way to get business going in this country is to drop the corporate income tax completely. Just drop it. If we drop the corporate income tax, we would be a magnet for investment from all around the world. We already are, but the prosperity would be unthinkable at that point. And we'd have more money than we know what to do with, let alone deficits. So I think we need to get rid of the corporate tax. And once again, he says, if Congress doesn't do this, I'm going to act on my own. No, you can't do that. We've got a Constitution that says that you are the one to execute the laws, not to make the laws. Talked about energy independence. And once again, he's done very little to get that going, but is taking credit for it. Talks about immigration reform. I agree with him 100%. 100%. Free societies need free borders. We need to have labor move freely to where capital is. I've got a good friend, and I've talked about him before, one of the wealthiest friends I know, who says, hey, either we open up the borders and let the labor come to our capital, or our capital is going to disappear and go to those cheaper countries where the labor is. And I would rather have door number one, and I'm sure you would too. So we need to let labor move towards our capital. People are an asset, not a liability. Talks about reforming work training programs. Well, the best thing you could do there is to disband our public universities, because our public universities subsidize the studying of stuff that the job market doesn't need. We don't need more history, sociology, music, and psychology majors. We just don't. And the market would take care of that. You say, well, there's private schools. No, those private schools, private universities are subsidized too, with all kinds of student aid and student loans. And so we need to get the government out of higher education and let the market decide what kind of work needs doing. And the market would take care of that. Talks about unemployment insurance, and 1.6 million people, their unemployment expired recently, and he chided Congress on that. Well, endless unemployment. People. I know people have been on unemployment for dozens and dozens of months, and in what universe is that helpful? We had 12 million soldiers, mostly men, some women, come home from World War II in 1945, and we didn't have the time to set up any programs for them. And within a matter of months, they found work. Well, they found work because they had to. We didn't have endless unemployment for them coming back, and I think it's really time to end this. To go sometimes years on unemployment is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the economy then never adjusts to the realities of what's happening. Talks about every child getting access to a world-class education in college. We don't need all of our kids going to college. We really don't. College is for the top 15% of the population. People are really gifted in academics. I wish I hadn't gone to college. Looking back, I learned better on my own. I'm more of an entrepreneur. I probably wasted time. I'm glad I met my wife there. But otherwise, my goodness, what a colossal waste of time. I was 4 years behind by the time I got out. And it's really for people who love studying and love learning. And let's have universities for that 15% of the people. For the rest of us, let's figure it out a different way. Talks about shouldn't have to raise a child in poverty. Well, okay, I agree. And I think the best way to get rid of poverty would be to get rid of government involvement in the economy. That would take care of that in no time, because poverty really is caused by all kinds of things getting in the way of economic growth, which would benefit everyone, including higher wages for people who are working, because labor would be scarce. We've had a war on poverty since I was a little kid, and we've got pretty much people in poverty as we had then. And before that, we didn't have a war on poverty, and poverty was decreasing quickly. And it was decreasing quickly for the first year or two of the war on poverty, because it already was decreasing. But then it leveled off once the war on poverty kicked in, and it's been level ever since. And we've ingrained poverty is what we've done. Actually like the idea of encouraging business owners to raise wages. I think that's a proper role for the President of the United States, using the bully pulpit and getting up there and saying, hey, employers, it's good for everybody and good for morale, good for business if you raise wages as well as you can. He talked about a pizza guy in Minneapolis who had done that by raising all of the wages above $10 an hour. And he encourages others to do so. I think that's great. What I don't want is him telling all businesses what they have to do, or they'll get penalized if they don't. There's a big difference between door number one and door number two. One is a free society, one's a coercive society. And people say they want all of these things and they want freedom too. There is no political freedom without economic freedom. And the two go hand in hand. And so I think it's great to tell people, hey, raise wages. But I just don't think that ought to be coerced. He also talked about how he would veto sanctions if the government were to, or the Congress were to put forth sanctions for Iran. And I agree with that, because I don't believe that we should be sanctioning anybody. I think sanctions are an act of war and ought to be treated as such. So once again, I think he's learning. He's picking up some things, but it's 6 years in, and I wish it had been 6 months or 6 weeks in rather than 6 years. Talked about, hey, thanks to me, your kids under 26 are now insured, health insurance-wise, and they can keep their insurance till they're 26. How great is that? Well, the only reason they couldn't in the first place was because of the regulation of the healthcare industry. Now, pretend that you're a healthcare insurer. Would you come up with a rule saying that parents have to kick their kids off of insurance at a certain age? No, you wouldn't. Look at parents and kids at that age. Which one has more money? Well, that would be the parents. So you would let the parents pay as long as they wanted to. So the whole idea that he saved us from a regulation that the government put there in the first place is kind of circular at best. And so as we look at these things, once again, just in the final analysis, the bottom line is that I believe he's a good man doing the best he can with, unfortunately, unexposed ways of thinking. He's got a certain pattern of thinking that is in line with the idea, the progressive idea, so-called progressive idea, since Wilson, that government is here to solve problems. The government is here to educate people. The government is here to provide health for people. Well, the only way to do that is to control their lives down to the finest detail, down to the last dollar. And we then no longer have a free society. And I think a free society is way too precious to give up for something like that. So once again, President Barack Obama, I think you did a pretty good job considering, but I really wish you would expose yourself to bigger ideas and leave governing to governing. Government is there to keep us from stealing from one another, to keep us from aggressing against one another, not to do those other things. They're here to protect us from foreign invaders, not to make sure that everything is running the way they want it to run. And so I think we ought to reclaim the idea of a free society. I think the Founding Fathers were right. I think it works. We had the wealthiest country in the world up until 1913, when we started to decide that the government should tell us what we put in our bodies, whether or not we have to go to war. The draft came in, the whole idea of the government regulating the value of the dollar, and all of those things. With that came income tax and all kinds of control. And I think it's time to rethink that. We can rethink that peaceably, and we can move peaceably into a free society, or we can wait for the whole thing to collapse, because there's no way they can continue to pay for something which is a bunch of promises which are without foundation. So until next year, that's the State of the Union for 2014. Well, that's all for today on Life and Liberty Radio. Thanks so much for sharing this part of your spiritual journey with me. Now, the views on this program are not necessarily those of my advertisers, sponsors, places I work, or do business with. They're purely my own, but I'm sharing them with you, so share your ideas with me. Write me on Twitter at Liberty House, LIBERTYHOUS, no E. Until next time, let's continue dreaming and working for a free and spiritually grounded society.